Hello, I'm Francis Seeley from GlobalNet 21, and I'd like to welcome you to this webinar tonight. We started with a video, and the video was really about the importance of ideas and trying to think in different ways in order to find solutions to problems, not thinking in the traditional way, not thinking in the conventional way that everyone always has, and decision makers often have, but thinking differently. And in this webinar, we're going to look at ideas and how you can turn those ideas into action. And when we do that, Evan Parker, who you can see here, is going to join us and take us through that. But we're going to start, first of all, just by telling you a bit about some of the things that we are going to do in the future. As I said, I'm Francis Seeley from GlobalNet 21. And as you know, many of you, some of you don't. I know there's some people here from GlobalNet 21, and there are other people here who probably haven't heard of us, but are joining us this webinar, maybe from different places in the globe. But GlobalNet 21 was set up to get people to talk about the big issues of the 21st century. We hold many meetings in London face-to-face, but we also hold these webinars, which are global, and people from across the world join us. And if you want to know about our webinars, if you want to know about our activities, then if you look on the right of the screen, you can see a link to GlobalNet 21 and our meetup site. And that's by far the best site to find out what we do, the events that we're holding, and find out which ones interest you. So if you're interested in any of those, then just click on the join here, and that will take you to the meetup site where you can join. We, as I say, hold a lot of events, and the webinar we're doing today really is a follow-up from a meeting we held a few weeks ago, a face-to-face meeting where we looked at how we can change ideas and turn them into action. And in fact, we have another meeting coming up fairly soon called Getting Involved. And if you look on the right again of the screen, you can see a link to that. That's a much more general meeting to the previous one we held. The one we previously held was really one that relates to this webinar, how we change ideas into action. But the one Getting Involved is about getting involved in GlobalNet 21 generally, doing many other things, and we do a whole lot of things. And if people want to find out more about what we do and want to get involved in what we do, then please come along to that on August the 22nd, I think it is. But if you click the register here button, that will take you to the site where you can register your interest if you want to take part. As I said, we also have these webinars regularly, and we try to do them and call them GN21 focus webinars, and we try to do them every week. Next week we won't be, we're going to have a break, but normally we do them every week. And in 2 weeks' time, we have a webinar. Our next GN21 focus webinar will be looking at how one area in London, Enfield, has started supporting refugees. We're going to look at a case study of that, where they've adopted a Canadian scheme of community support to work with refugees coming in and to work at with the local authority. And we're going to look at that technologically willing, because the presenter has got an iPad and he's never done this before. So we're hoping it will go okay, but we shall see. Anyhow, if you're interested in that, you can click on the link there and you can register for that. So I hope you will join us there and take part if you're interested in that topic. One of the things that I know Evan will be talking about will be how you influence decision makers, how you influence society, how you influence citizens generally. Now, one of the people you clearly want to influence are politicians, and sometimes we think that's a pretty difficult thing to do, and some of us don't even try, we give up on it. But I just want to give you a little what we call digital story, which is a clip of an interview we've done with someone, and we try to do this now every week. And this is a lecturer from a university in Canterbury called Christ Church, who actually talks about how politicians really are living in a very confusing time, and they do need help in changing ideas into action, and it's important to work with them. So let's listen to this video now. So you heard a bit of that. I think it ended a bit early, but it gave you some idea of what was being said there. That politicians very often are confused about the decisions they have to make and are looking always for information. So we're going to go to Evan now, because Evan has got some ideas about how we in GlobalNet 21, working with other organizations, can try and turn some of our ideas into action. By developing a whole series of activities, including think tanks, what he calls people think tanks. Anyhow, Evan, thank you for joining us, and I'm going to hand over to you now to take over and take us through your ideas about how we can turn ideas into action.
Okay, Francis, can you everyone hear me okay? Okay, right. Well, first, Francis, thanks for setting up this webinar. It's a big job, and you do a fantastic job, I must say. Apologies, my presentation isn't that slick, and it's certainly not over-rehearsed, but I have worked on the backdrop. If you notice, it could be my kitchen, but I've got a nice picture up there, which I hope will keep you interested. And in a sense, this is more of a taster for what we're trying to do. And basically, it does what it says on the tin. What we're trying to do is to give the things that we do in GlobalNet 21 a bigger voice than they already have, and across a bigger community. What we want to do is drive things through to make a positive impact on our society. And that's by no means belittling what we already do, but this is a new route to which we think we can get our ideas out there. Next slide. One before that, Francis. Yeah, the drivers, the key drivers of our society. This is sort of a bit of a personal view, but they're what I consider really overarching elements of what makes our society function. First, the way we prepare future generations, that's a very profound responsibility that any society has, and of course it's fundamental to the way that society rolls on. The political structures that we have, of course, are also critical. How we organize ourselves, how we agree to abide by certain laws, and how we elect those people who are going to determine those laws, and determine the policies that are going to make our society function. The economic structures, of course, are also critical and very complicated. I mean, capitalism sort of is the order of the day and shows very little sign of going away, despite some shortcomings. How we look after our environment, that's anything from the tree outside in the street, through to the green spaces that you enjoy, through to the quality of the air that you breathe in, right through to how we look after our climate at the global level. And finally, our ethical behavior, how we treat other people. That's by other people, that includes people from next door, from in the street, from in your town, in your local community, right through to peoples across the world who you've never met, but you may be aware of what they're doing. That's a big thing, and particularly there when how we treat people who maybe have some problems. Next slide, Francis. So the motivation for this GN21 voice really is this list of things below. The big stuff that makes our society work have evolved over the years, sometimes over the centuries. And some of us certainly consider that the establishment, elitists, define and control the agendas in our society. That the ordinary individual really has very little to say other than perhaps cast a vote at the appropriate time in a democratic society. Now that you might argue is far from optimum in today's world, because new technologies, globalization, evolving world attitudes and understandings can drive new approaches. We really are in a new era, and I think it's a moral duty to respond to that. Next slide. So what we want are new ideas of consequence, in a sense, out with the old and in with the new. And we certainly need to excite the people who are considering these things. Next slide. Socrates sort of, I think, summed it up pretty well. If you really want to bring about change, then focus on the new, looking forward rather than looking back. And the next slide. So the role of GN21 Voice is certainly not to undermine our current work. The sort of things that Francis organises. I'm involved with Conway Hall Society. We have big events, lots of new ideas talked about, and of course we hope they spread through our society. That's also what I would call a bottom-up approach. The new approach, which is being proposed today, is really a top-down approach. This is where we have much better engagement with the establishment, those people who are able to take these ideas through to implementation. And of course, we want to disseminate to a wider society. I recognise, I'm sure you all recognise, that's an incredibly tough assignment. Next slide. How am I going on for time, I wonder?
You've got about 2 or 3 minutes on the first half.
Okay, the way we're going to do, the proposal is to establish a small number of what we call people's think tanks. These are where we're pulling people together, the younger, the brave. It's certainly not for the faint-hearted, because these won't always function as you think they should do. Small numbers of people, 2 to 4 people, who can critically commit the time, the energy, and have the imagination. And then we have to develop the strategy. This includes developing what I would call a portfolio of items, a 40-minute lecture, right down to a 2-minute lecture you might do for a YouTube presentation, and even an elevator pitch, a 1-minute thing where you might engage with a person for a very short time and get over your idea. Next slide. The dissemination, of course, is critical. And here we're going to go, there's nothing, I hope, no stone left unturned here. Radio, TV, of course, they're the main media by which you can get big ideas out. on the radio. In this country, we have the Day program, which is considered the agenda-setting program. You can get onto that and talk about new ideas. I've done it on 2 occasions. You approach government, MPs, political parties, petitions to Parliament, and government departments. All those people can be approached these days. The press, of course, letters to the newspapers, articles, ultimately maybe even a book you might think about publishing. We can think about organising TEDx events. That can be done to get a higher profile. Of course, use internet and social media like there's no tomorrow. And of course, give talks at prestigious meetings. And that also is a doable job. Over the page. Team up with other networks. Francis has always mentioned this. There's no point in reinventing the wheel, for sure. Those who have similar ideas in mind. And in particular, fast track. And if you've got an idea and there's a professional think tank out there who's working in this area, approach them. And ultimately, of course, we want to get this new thinking embedded in our society. I think that's me done. We go straight into the video now, which I think is quite nice.
Okay.
Okay. Finishing the second part of this talk. This is how we envisage the sort of structure of GN21 Voice. There's a sort of administration, a very small administration in the middle of all of this. This will provide, hopefully, encouragement to undertake the work, provide some of the tools that you need to do this, including how to maybe launch a TED event, how to approach high-profile people, that sort of thing. But the big activity is the projects that go out from this central organisation. These are the big projects. These are headed by a think tank, and they're the things that really are going to be in the public eye. Ultimately, they become only very loosely coupled to the central administration. Next slide. And these are sort of project areas. Some of these have come up since we've been talking about this this activity. One, redefining education. That I think is a big job, and Ken Robinson in the video you've just seen made reference to that. Alternative political structures. I know there's people already on the network who are very interested in doing this, and I think ideas on that are of course welcome. Unraveling and rebuilding economic activity. That's a huge undertaking, but I know people on GlobalNet 21 have been working on this for some time, and I think making very good progress. And then sustainable living, and this is where we, as I say, we try and make sure that it can exist on this planet for some years to come, if not centuries to come. And one of the things, an offshoot of these things that are currently of interest to me, and I sort of apologise for this, are the NHS and Brexit. Both of those are very topical. Both of those, I think, would qualify for a think tank activity. And I'm sorry, the next few slides are a bit personal, but these are sort of things that one could imagine doing. Now, redefine education, I mean redefining it. It's I've done some work with others on a major rethink of examination methods used in secondary level, for example. This is right through to abolishing set exams, the GCSEs and the A-levels. It's my opinion, certainly, that the examination structure corrupts the whole education system. Next slide. And another thing, as Ken Robinson was telling, the IT revolution, I think it enables new ways of doing teaching. It frees up, I think, a lot of time to do some more critical things. And also, I think, frees up teachers to do things which are more important than standing in front of a class and just lecturing, talking to 30 students. That itself is a viable project. And the next one, alternative political structure. Well, as I say, I know there are people on the GlobalNet who are very interested in this, and this is the sort of thing that can be done. I'm a member of Hampstead Labour Party, and I was charged with doing a high profile event. This was it. This was arranged last March. I'm not quite sure by November 22nd whether there will be a Labour Party, a recognisable Labour Party, but even so, this event, I've got two high-profile MPs and certainly two very high-profile professors from good universities who are going to talk about a new vision for the Labour Party. I may try and persuade them, depending on what happens in September, to this is a new vision really for politics. So that's the sort of thing that can be done. And the next one, Brexit. Well, I made a petition. I was upset by the Brexit vote, big time, as a lot of people were. I submitted a petition to Parliament, which you can do online quite easily. The first one was turned down because it was too close to another one. The second one, bypass Brexit, but work for EU reform to allow UK border immigration control. That was, I heard that was accepted today, so that's online. If anyone feels inclined to look at that and sign up, please do so. Over the page, sustainable living. I know that I think Ross and Andy have interest in a sustainable living project, but this just is a case study showing that, again, I'm coming back to me and a colleague have worked on trying to change the mindset on climate change, now for 8 years. So this is, of course, extensive and it took a lot of time, but it was a hobby. I did this in my spare time because I had a full-time job during most of that period. And in a sense that we were not, we approached high-profile people. Occasionally we got big research programs going in 2008. We developed an alternative policy, 2009, 2010, and we attended a lot of meetings, generally in London, climate change committee meetings. There's a lot of climate change institutes in London. We went to those. We tried to publish, but we failed because we were providing something rather revolutionary and certainly not what most of the people working climate change want to hear. We did secure a TV appearance, but in the end we had to turn it down because we weren't quite ready for that. We were invited by the Government Department, Department of Energy and Climate Change, DEC, to give a presentation where I think we started to get these ideas out there and people to think about it. And we continue to refine our talk, and the talk is now in the mode, and I gave it at Conway Hall not many weeks ago, why we should abandon CO2 emission reduction targets. That goes absolutely against the grain and of what you think the grain of logical thought, but we have good reasons for thinking that's possible. And in very recently, in fact this month, I wrote a letter to the Minister of the Department of Climate Change suggesting that he should start thinking along these lines. So that's just sort of a way in which you can approach these things if you're so determined. And the next one. And this is the last slide, reformulating NIH. I think the NHS is in a mess. It requires a huge amount of restructuring, of getting much greater levels of investment. As a consequence of that, I approached healthcare organisations, think tanks, King's Fund, the BMA, British Medical Corporation Association, and the Centre for Policy Studies. That's Margaret Thatcher's think tank. That's going right to the steam end. And in the end, I persuaded the director of Tim Knox of CPS to give a talk, NHS Thinking the Unthinkable. And that's where you're going to use privatization tools to considerably change and enhance the current NHS. Unfortunately, that talk never took place in the end at Conway Hall because as soon as you mention privatization, no one wants to know. No politician, no member of the public. But Tim Knox and I certainly think it's the way forward. So just to finish off, I mean, my suggestion is that we should think big, think the unthinkable if necessary, and certainly think that you can make things happen.
Okay.
Done for, Francis.
Okay. Thanks so much, Evan. That was quite a comprehensive description of what you're doing. What we'd like to do now is get people to write comments and ask questions. And you can see on the right of your screen, if you're in the chat room, that you can type in those messages and comments and we'll put them to Evan. Fong has joined us, who you can see here, and Fong helps us on quite a few webinars, and she helps put questions to whoever the speakers are we have. So both Fong and I will help do that with Evan. But let me get it clear first of all, Evan, what you're trying to do in this webinar, which is, you know, a very specific webinar, really. It's not one which gets a wide audience, but it's one where you get people who are really interested, you hope, or we hope, in changing ideas, turning them into action. What you hope is it will get people on here who are interested in some of the things you said and would be interested in being involved in these activities, and particularly the think tanks. And then you can put them in touch with the other people and hopefully get some thinking going around those topics with a strategy to do the sort of things that you said in your presentation. Is that right, Evan?
Summary.
Hello?
I mean, we really want people to hear me.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Yeah, we really a sense of passion for wanting to see our society improve and to try and make that happen. And it's those people, and they're special people for sure. Not everyone, you know, can give that amount of time. One or two. And hope in the end that this webinar will pull others.
Okay. You're beginning to break up a bit at the moment, so we'll just hold on and hopefully that will clear. We've got Alana on here, and maybe Fong, you can take up Mary's points in a minute, but Alana, I think, actually said that she would be really interested in a project about this, and that was when you were talking about sustainability and carbon reduction, and she said she'd like to know more about carbon reductions. So maybe you could say a bit about that, Evan, and also about the group that might start, and we hope will start, and who we've got on it, around sustainability. And then, Lana, I can make sure your email goes to Evan at the end of this or tomorrow, and he will contact you about that.
Yeah. Hi, Lana. Yes. I mean, what one is very interested in doing is having a real impact on CO2 emission reduction, and I at least think that our current policies are failing in that regard. So what we want to do is put in alternative policies which will have a real impact, I think, on the CO2 emissions. But they are not obvious, and we think that the CO2 emission reduction target culture is completely misguided. It doesn't help at all in this regard. So what we're trying to do is persuade governments to really focus on doing the research and development to create clean energy systems, where the energy is at costs which are comparable to those produced by fossil fuel. Did you get all that, Francis?
Yeah, we did. I think we're having trouble with Fong's sound. There's no sound coming from her. We didn't have a chat.
Can you hear? Yeah.
It's okay now. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just I think it's because I mute without knowing. And Marie Fee, she was saying the Labour Party people, are they anti-committees?
Anti-Corbyn.
Yeah, because it's just a question. She thinks that we have a lot of battle today, so maybe it's something that we wouldn't want to talk about.
Yes, I mean, what's happening in the Labour Party is, of course, is unbelievable. But you might argue it's a great time to get in there and start to try and have an impact. And I think a very good time. But I think we'll know more by the end of September what the Labour Party is doing. But it's very tough at this stage. But yeah, I mean, and that's what they're to talk on November 22nd. I'm still thrashing out with the speakers what they will be speaking about in detail, depending on what happens in September.
I suppose what they were saying in a way is that Jeremy Corbyn is providing new thinking for the Labour Party. So what do you mean, and what do you think they will mean by new vision? Because I suppose part of this is asking that if the question, if we are going to look at new ideas and new visions, what are they exactly? Because that's quite important. I mean, are they ours, or are they someone else's? Where do they come from? How are they created? What does the think tank put their focus on?
Well, I think the think tank will come up with new ideas, or pretty new ideas about how a political party might function. And in particular, let's say the Labour Party. I'm non-political. I can go across the political spectrum. But I think there is a case I think, for devising with the internet. I think there's now a possibility of us being able to get rid of the notion of taxes, whereby people, because taxes is a dirty word to a lot of people, they don't like paying them. So to create a structure, internet-based structure, would allow people to pay, invest in their own, in their country, if you like, in their own welfare. They will be obliged to create obliged to make this investment. So in the forms that, in the sense that they're asked to do that, but they will make choices about where they put that. And so if people there'll be a huge amount of tutoring on the internet to guide people on how they should create those, where they should put their money. Do they want to put it in health service? Do they want to put it in the environment? Or do they put it in education or defense or whatever? It'd be up to them to make those decisions after a certain level of investment has been achieved in each sector. So that's I think it's a very new idea, and it needs to be, if you like, aired for sure.
But the problem, the thing is, Evan, is if you invite people to come on the think tank, you're expressing your ideas now, but they may come up with something that's totally, totally different.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it would be up to the person who heads up that think tank in order to pull together all these ideas and then to put turn them into a, if you like, a nice package of whatever it's going to be, a lecture or a report or a YouTube video, and then approach the powers that be, governments, etc., or people within the Labour Party, and certainly it's very easy to get hold of Labour Party MPs, and then to talk these things through.
So what you're asking for is for people who are interested to let you know, and we now already know Alana is interested in the carbon reduction and sustainability ones, so we've got one person really interested. So for the rest of you out there, if you're interested in any of these areas or any ones we haven't mentioned so far, could you please let us know, type it in, and then Evan can get in touch with you and we can see how we take it from there. So if you can do that, that would be great. But there's some other questions come up. Do you want to take that, Fong?
Yeah, yes. Pamela, she asked about Brexit, about your thoughts, and if you have any links you want to share.
Well, Brexit is a very tough one, of course. And the question is can an ordinary mortal, or can anyone, really start to have an influence here? I mean, I think someone put a petition into Parliament suggesting a second referendum. And that was just an ordinary, single individual. Now, I don't think that's for a second, whether that's going to function, I don't think that will fly. But a petition into Parliament is a route to helping the government go through Brexit and what that style of Brexit is going to be. But and again, you know, you can the ideas on that are just I don't have any bright ideas other than a petition to Parliament on that. And hopefully you would, if you thought that's getting some traction, it was getting a significant number of votes, you would then contact the Today programme and or Channel 4 News, and I've done both those. It's quite easy to do, to come in and maybe they can organise a small panel discussion on that, if that gets any traction. But that's just an idea at the moment. I mean, it's one I feel, because it's so urgent that we try and do something on that. It's one that I thought that needs doing, but by no means shuts the door on any other proposal that might make the difference.
I noticed that Clive's asked us some questions, and Fong said, would you like Evan to respond to that? But Clive, I assume it's Clive Menzies from your questions, interest in hierarchy. It's got to be Clive Menzies. Does that mean, Clive, that you're interested in these groups as well? And I ought to say to everyone, Clive has already done a meeting with us, if it's the right Clive. He comes from the Critical Thinking Group, and we did a meeting that followed up on our basic universal income. And so, Clive, there may be people in your Critical Thinking Group who would be interested in these think tanks as well. And because we want to involve people from other groups and other organisations, it would be great if there was. So if I've got the right Clive, and it is Clive Menzies, let us know if you'd be interested in that. That would be great. But hierarchy and interest are his two big things. And Fong asked Evan if you want to respond to that.
Well, yes, I did mention this to Clive, and thank you for joining, Clive. What I would say that you know, you are very well positioned, I think, to take your thinking forward, and you do in lots of ways. I mean, it's a huge new agenda in the political economy that you are proposing, and it's a big job. And whether the sort of think tank concept, whether thinking, getting your, you know, approach BBC News, for example. I mean, and particularly in August, where there's no news knocking about at the moment, you could possibly get some traction on that if you rang up one of those big organisations. You need to get those ideas out there big time across the bigger media. But I mean, Clive is clever enough to know that this is what needs to be done. It's a question of really devolving the infrastructure to make this happen.
I mean, Fong, please pick up if you've got anything. But but Clive, yeah. I mean, if you are interested in think tanks, please do. But Clive is making a critique of think tanks itself. He's saying, Evan, that they are hierarchical.
Yes. So Simon, he would like to know, he's interested, and he would like to know how to engage a wider audience.
Who was that? Sorry.
Simon.
Simon, yes. Well, by approaching the media outlets. I mean, approach all the. You can write letters to the newspapers, you know, including the tabloid press. The Daily Mail is always a good one for wacky ideas. Write good letters to the Times, to the Guardian, etc. All that type of activity, which is what I've done in the climate change area. You can also ring up when it's either very newsworthy, that it's appropriate, or there's lack of news. Those are two times when you can go in with ideas and get some traction. It is possible to ring up producers of BBC, of the TV programs, and get an audience. It isn't that difficult. And
yeah,
so
but sorry, I interrupt you, but sometimes I can see that you try to write to people, but you don't get response, or you just ignore you, or you don't get the offer to write an article or to go on TV. It's not that easy, is it?
It can be done. I mean, I've done it, and it's not that difficult. And certainly the Today programme, which is considered the agenda-setting programme for the UK, you can ring up producers on the air. I've done it on 2 occasions, and it worked very well indeed. And I think it's possible to do that. But it's the big new ideas, and yet they need to have, if you like, some exposure. Either they're very newsworthy, or you have prior exposure of these things through newspapers, articles in the paper, article in journals. If you can get contacts with the editor of various journals, from Statesman, etc., you can suggest articles. So I think what I would say is think big in this area. Don't be frightened about approaching the people. On the occasions I've done it, I probably had a 50% strike rate.
Yes. Sorry, a very quick question. When you do it, how can you structure it so you can get the attention from different group of people? So how do you market yourself and strategy?
Okay, in the case of the climate change, it was after I approached Channel 4 after they did a big program on climate change, and told them they got the wrong perspective. And then they were going to set up a panel involving me and the producer of that program, and we could talk on Channel 4 News, for example. So it's a question of seizing the opportunity. And you know, when there's a little news day, people are just desperate for interesting items to come forward. But if it can relate, obviously, to a topical something happening on that day or coming up, then it's much easier to do that.
I mean, you're getting a bit of opposition on the chat. Some people are saying that think tanks are too hierarchical. Simon agrees with that, and he thinks it won't work. Clive is saying, I mean, you've got 2 alternative views here. You've got Clive saying that really, rather than have think tanks, we should be working with communities and families, and I assume trying to change culture. And we've got David saying what we need to do is get people together so that they can work out between themselves their own moral code. So 2 people are talking about, 3 people there are talking about 2 different ways of doing things, and they're a bit suspicious about having think tanks and contacting the already existing elites because they think that won't work. Now, how do you respond to that?
Yeah, okay. Well, what those people seem to be saying is that this is what I call what we already do. We already have communities interacting with one another. We already have big events where you invite a lot of different people. That's what I call the bottom-up approach. And you hope in the end, and I think it can be very effective, and that can pervade upwards. But what GN21 Voice is proposing, we also go to the top and start to influence those people who can really implement change. Those 2 things obviously will meet in the middle somewhere. But I think it's bad to ignore those people at the top. I think that because I think it is possible to get a much wider engagement of a particular idea if those people are involved. And certainly their media outlets, of course, can cover millions of people rather than, if you like, hundreds. So I think it's you have to go in there. The hierarchical approach, I think, is, of course, I mean, ultimately, you want to, that is not the best way to run an economy. I agree with Clive in that respect. But in order to change things, I think you have to really attack structures from both ends. Ultimately, the thinkings will come together in the middle. But it is very different to doing the things at the bottom-up approach.
Yes, Pamela, she agreed with you that we should speak to those who have power. And another question, Marie-Fille is asking, why not feed them with some different stories?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I mean, they've got to see this article come forward to them. It's got to look interesting, hopefully topical, and they can run it. And all I can say is my small amount of experience in this area, it works at a good fraction of the time. And I think, you know, sometimes they won't even respond to you. But I find in the main, if you go forward with a well-considered view, which is particularly topical, that they will respond. That's been my experience over 20 years of doing this stuff.
I mean,
okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, Alana was saying that she thinks we need both, and that, you know, we've got really quite a difference of opinion on here. Some people who say we should do what you're doing, Evan. Some people saying that, you know, that's a waste of time because the establishment won't listen, we have to do it in a different way. And people saying we need to do both. We need to change culture, we need to change people, we need to change networks or workman networks, and we also need to contact those in power and try to get them to change as well and have influence. So there's a wide variety of feelings. Now, in terms of turning ideas into action, Evan, you're not going to just concentrate on one, or do you think we should look at all of those and try and get other people involved in doing the things that they think are important as well?
Well, in a sense, we already do that. We do that big time at Conway Hall. You do it big time on the Global Net. That is, in a sense, the job that's already going on. You can also argue that Clive also does that type of stuff by stuff he puts on the web, etc. But there's a huge amount on the web these days, and you've got to it's one way. It will ultimately pervade through our society. I'm just reading Melvin Bragg's Now is the Time about Wat Tyler, where he generated a huge amount of interest in a lot of people in changing society, and he was ultimately shot. So you've got to get people excited by new ways of doing things, not to threaten their position, because this is very long term. And talking about changing the way you do politics, again, is a very long-term project. We are talking, I'm looking a decade ahead before you start to get these ideas out there. But you can't threaten people's current position. That is very difficult. That's the problem we're having with climate change, because we think people are doing it wrong. It urgently needs to be changed. Politics, changing education will be a much longer-term activity. If you threaten people's positions, they will not respond. That is for sure. Keep them happy. Keep them excited. This is something, as far as they're concerned, it's a little bit on the side, but give it time to grow and blossom.
So Clive is asking, is there any process, like constitutions, elections, by which human being can transform an immoral act to moral act?
Oh, Clive, that's a very difficult question. As you know, and I think, you know, large numbers of people doing things often doesn't work. We know that in the Iraq War, for example. We know that with Wat Tyler. You need to be, I think, cleverer than that. I think you need to go access the top, and you need to excite those people in new ideas about different ways of doing things, whilst not threatening their existing position. That's critical, because they will tell you to go away. But something which can develop alongside things is a way, I think, is a way that is worth doing in tandem with the excellent work that goes on at the ground level, getting a lot of people interested in things.
Yes, I agree with you. But Clive is saying change does threaten people. So it is,
well, no,
it is very difficult. How to approach people with change without threatening them.
Yeah, well, we've got to, it's long-term change, and so we're saying that this, and of course managing that transition between a present state to what we would, or what hopefully people will consider a more desirable state is a big job. But I'm thinking long-term. And the sort of stuff that Clive is talking about is major, major, major. And that's got to be done very systematically. And I don't quite know whether you break that down into elements, and so you sort of get one bit presented to the powers that be, which is not too threatening, but it's interesting. So maybe it may be broken down into bite-sized chunks that is presented then to the people.
I mean, Alana says quite an interesting thing, and you said it already, Evan, and maybe Clive and Simon, who's the opposition here, might want to respond to it. You said, Evan, you shouldn't threaten people; they won't listen. And Alana says threatening is not threatening. It's like offering people a new position that they hadn't thought about. And maybe, you know, those people who think politicians don't listen, it's because they talk to politicians in the wrong way. They actually use threatening and confrontational language. On the other hand, people will think politicians, even if you talk to them in the right way, won't listen. Now, you have to make your choice on that. You seem to be an optimist about that, Evan, that they will listen if you talk to them in the right way.
No question about that. I think that is possible. You've got to excite them with this new idea, which doesn't, if you like, challenge their existing position. People are very sort of, they want to protect their current position. And then start to tempt them away into say, this may be a better way of doing things. And I mean, we should have, I mean, I would even go as far as to say, let's think big. I mean, we have on TV, you know, programs called Politics Today. Why don't we have something like Politics Tomorrow? Let's get people thinking about future directions. We are undoubtedly in a new era, and a huge number of things are on the horizon. And we need to be challenging those big time and thinking about those things. But to get the people excited about it, I think is a critical bit. Not threatened by it.
No, that's why we came back again from one person said before that we should give them some different stories.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, dress it up in a way which gets them think, yeah, I think we have to take this on board. And I think that we have to change mindsets. I mean, it's a huge problem, and particularly education. I know that Ken Robinson has said, you know, I've tried his damnedest to get the education department in the UK to think differently, but it's very, very difficult. It's a long, slow process. So there again, you've got to go forward there with things that they are ultimately going to find exciting, that's for sure.
Yeah. And Peter, he also suggested you talk to Nesta.
Yes.
They do some critical thinking and come up with some new ideas.
Yep.
And also Pamela, she also talked about key change or environment brings all other things together.
Yes. I mean, you know, this is, I want to emphasize the major point about this as we're going in at the top. We are not going along doing stuff along the bottom. That's what we're already doing, and it's great. But we are going in at the top. We're trying to excite people there that change could be good for them in the longer term. That's the big job.
Okay, we're coming very close to the end now, so let's sort of sum up and sort of finish on that. I know that those people who are interested in doing the things the way that you think it can be done, Evan, you'd be interested in hearing from them.
No question.
So, you know, Alana, if you we'll get Evan will contact you or make sure he has your email. And if there's anyone else who wants to get involved in that, then please do. On the other issues, I think we're discussing. Clive has already agreed to do a webinar. I've been asking him if he'd do it, and he's now agreed. He said it on there, so we can talk of his bottom up, his changing of culture, his changing of consciousness ideas, and see about that. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the 1968. Revolt in Paris and the barricades, and how I got very excited by it, and how change happened very quickly, but how it then dissipated very quickly, and that, you know, it wasn't enough. So sometimes we have to think, we get excited about consciousness changing, but it doesn't always last as long as we think. So we need to think of all sorts of different ways and have different strategies and different ways of doing it. So it's good to have what Evan has said. It's good to hear what Clive says and thinking what we can do that. And also what Pamela said, she talks about the Internet of Things, the way in which interconnectivity is in itself changing our culture. And there's a whole new, I mentioned to Evan the other day, there's a whole new sort of department in universities beginning to spring up called social physics that looks exactly at that, how big data, how interconnectivity is in itself an instrument of change more fundamental than anything else. And I think we can look at that as well. So I think there are lots of ways we can do it. But can I thank you all for your questions, and thank Evan for joining us today and for taking part and for putting your ideas. And I hope all of you who want to take part in Evan's Voices project, please let us know, and please do that. And we will also look at Clive's views and other views as well, and see how we can progress things in that area as well. What we're going to do, though, is finish with a video which actually is a bit over the top because it's an American being very American, but he does talk with great power about the transformation of ideas and the power of that transformation, and it is quite a good thing, I think, to finish up this webinar with. So when the video's over, the webinar will have concluded. So thank you all again for taking part. Thank you for your questions, your comments, your debates on both sides of this, and Evan for taking part and presenting this. Phong, thank you again for coming on and helping out, which is great. So let's finish with the video.